Today we have Jeff Friedman with us. The bio is just extraordinary. As a published 6 previous publications, and he's been in just about every. It's like the what's what of poetry journals and magazines. Real heavy hitters: American Poetry Review, Poetry, New England Review. I mean, these are places that they don't even. You've got to just to get it, them get a whiff of you. You've got to be like extraordinary. He's won numerous awards, national endowments for the award. Won the Milton Dorfman Poetry Prize, the Missouri Review Editors Prize, 2 individual grants from the New Hampshire State Council for the Arts, and he's also. Do you still do contributing editorship for the National Bridge?
Yeah, that's a good question.
That's a good question.
That's why I asked them because they have my name on there, but I haven't talked to them in years.
Huh. And his new collection today is he's going to be reading from Floating Tales, of which I write this. The Floating Tales in Jeff Friedman's latest invention have flown a great distance to get to us, and they've tried their hand at most everything. A high fabulous diet of Bible notables and beast, old men and drones, PowerPoint, and yes, Andrew, puppets. Wow. That's as omnivorous as a dumpster diving bear, that so trades in on both the standards and newly updated in so self-same a manner the brand gets rebranded mid-gesture. Postmodern, you might say? Not so slow, Chuck. These prime movers are so over time. Here they're at it again, game for everything, mutating, tying an other on, there finding themselves in a different state altogether, amounting to not only more than its parts, but its stock options. You'll find it all in this playbill. The mini sitcom and mockumentary, the multi-tiered send-up and 1-minute tour of Purgatorio, the unsampled and mass-produced, the skit, and not so routine. They not only stir up resist, writing themselves as much as humanly possible, steering free of the tyrannical line, singing with an immigrant's tongue, with a vaudevillian swagger lived and not staged, but also fret ceremoniously like so many Beckett characters, existentially staking out their turf, not just for the next nosedive fall, whether high art or Pratt, but for the after-party laughs. And ladies and gentlemen, we're so happy to have Jeff with us tonight.
Wow, that was a beautiful introduction. About 8 or 9 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, I don't know, I started, all of a sudden I started writing these short prose pieces, and at the time I was writing them, I didn't know what to make of them. So I kind of went back and forth. I'd write a prose piece or two, and I go, I'm a verse poet, so I better go write a verse poem. And then so I'd write them, and this went back and forth for a while until one day they just kind of took over. And that's really actually what I've only been able to write those for quite a long time. So I keep trying to come back to write regular poems and lines. I don't know that I call these, a lot of these were intended as maybe micro stories or mini stories, fables, and they're all umbrellaed under the term prose poem right now. So I thought I would start with a poem I haven't read in a few years from an earlier book, just to give you maybe a sense of what I was doing before. I'm going to start with some comic pieces, and then after I read one poem, I thought it would be good to do this. I don't know why I thought it would be good. I just thought about it the second, so I think it might be good. Anyway, I'm going to start with, I thought I'd start with oral sex, because a lot of things start with oral sex, And anyway, I read somewhere in a book that 1969, I don't know why, but 1969 was a peak year for oral sex. Now, really, if you think about it, I don't know what that means. Does that mean that was a year that people were having a higher quality of oral sex, or that more people were having oral sex, or that more people were having a higher quality of oral sex? I really don't know. I just know that I was way below the average that year, and I still sort of resent it. So anyway, I wrote this poem about it. You're a long way from the pearl in the pulpit, she says, when I go down on her. But I keep at it, twirling like a helicopter taken by the wind. And I remember my father telling me, son, straighten up and fly right, wondering if this is what he meant. She pulls me up to her legs, only to lie next to her. I recall our first nights of lovemaking, how I hoisted her against a wall, how we floated over the wet streets like lovers in a Chagall painting, like men and women in Kama Sutra drawings, how the orgasms rolled like dice. That was real lovemaking, I say. That was someone else, she replies. I plunge downward and let my tongue do the talking. And even though I'm feeling its passion, nothing happens. I review the steps where I might have moved too fast, too slow, or pressed down too heavily or lightly. But remember reading something about how it should all come naturally, as leaves to the trees. Now I just hold her in my arms, and she seems relaxed, almost happy. Who has an orgasm every time anyway, I say. You do, she answers. So I'm going to read it. I'm going to start in Floating Tales with another relationship poem, but it's tackled in a different, oh, wait a minute, this is mine. Is it mine? Oh, no, this is mine. It's tackled, the only way I know is I have all these markers on here. I can't find anything because I put so many markers in here that, but at least it gives me a sense that I marked something, you know. So I'm going to read, I'm going to start with Bear Fight. I'm going to start with this piece called Bear Fight, which is a different approach to relationships, I guess. Everybody who lives in this area, and I come from St. Louis originally, is familiar with bears. You know, so you don't have a problem with that. Bears actually, not wolves, bears actually huff. And in our neighborhood, we have bears all the time. And like, you know, they're in the tree right in my driveway. And they've actually been nose to nose with me and my dog and my wife and in our carport. So we've got them all the time. So I wrote a poem, kind of realistic poem about bears called Bear Fight. When Liza fell in with a bear, I was more than disappointed, as I had been in love with her since childhood. What's he got that I don't, I asked as we walked past the diner together. He's a bear, she said. She let go of my hand. He gets a little jealous when I'm out with my friends. Why do you want to be with a bear anyway? Two teenagers pushed past us with their skateboards. Balloons floated above Main Street, announcing a sale at the furniture shop. Why do you want to be with me, she asked. We parted ways when the light changed, but later I went to her home dressed as a bear. She opened the door. Come in, she said, putting her arms around me. You don't smell like a bear, she said. Then in walked the bear with a fierce look on his face. He growled, and so did I. He cuffed me, so I cuffed him back. Then we grappled with each other, bear hugging, until Liza stepped in between us and held out her hands. I'm sick of bears, she said. Get out of here. I ripped off my bear mask. I'm not a bear, I said. The bear ripped off his. I quit this game, he said. I'm not a bear either. The bear ripped off his. I quit this game, he said. I'm not a bear either. Liza removed her mask, and she wasn't Liza. We ran away as fast as we could. I made it back to my place and locked the door, turning on the outside light, but all night I heard her huffing. So I'm going to stick with some comic pieces for a little while, and then I'll switch over to some morbid poems. Yeah. Okay, this one's called Difficult Times, and I think it's based on the, maybe on the premise, you know how when anybody breaks bad news to you, you know, they always like act like it's hurting them more than you. So that's sort of the, and this actually, you know, the Bear Fight poem wasn't actually realistic as I had promised, and this one is closer to being realistic, even though maybe not entirely, but it was based on a situation that occurred with me, so I'm going to read it. You know, it takes place in a kind of office situation. Difficult times. The boss came in with his usual alacrity. Sorry we have to let you go, he said. He held the door frame and hung his head, as if stunned by his own revelation. When I got up to offer him my chair, he crumbled into it and began sobbing, the tears running down his red cheeks. I handed him my handkerchief, which he used to sop up the tears. Then he blew his nose, and the chair shot back into the wall. It's so hard, my job, he cried. These are difficult times, I answered, patted his shoulder for support. He bent over as if he were going to be sick. I pushed the wastebasket under his face, because if he made a mess, I was worried I'd be responsible for cleaning up. He coughed a few times and spit into it. I've been here 10 years. Do you have to let me go, I asked. Suddenly, he fell on the floor, doubled up, a fierce pain in his gut. I called the infirmary, but the operator broke in to say that the infirmary had been shut down. My boss rolled back and forth as if in a seizure. He moaned so loudly he couldn't hear me repeat my question. So loudly the floors and windows vibrated. When I pinned his shoulders, he went limp and his eyes rolled back. I couldn't hear his breathing. Firing me had killed my boss. How would I explain that to human resources? Then, miraculously, he came to, smiling and cheerful. "You'll be missed," he said, and jumped to his feet, extending his open hand. The next one is actually the first poem in the book, and it's I guess, a lot of these poems are now like more in what I would call fabulism. I think I went from sort of what the eye half creates, half perceives, to sort of creating these altered reality pieces, which you've just gotten a little bit of. And so this is a good example of one. White feather. After Alexandra kissed me, a white feather flew out of my mouth. I pretended that nothing out of the ordinary had happened, though the feather floated between us for a long while before it fell on the carpet. The feather was long and bowed with soft fringe. I wanted to pick it up and twirl it, but Alexandra seemed concerned. "Did you eat a white bird?" she asked. I shook my head. "It's only one feather," I answered. She eyed me suspiciously, though a moment before she had seemed perfectly happy to be kissing me. To prove that there was no problem, I kissed her, and everything was fine. Our lips met, our tongues touched and tangled, as they had 1,000 times before. Then another feather floated from my mouth and stuck in her thick black hair. She pulled it out and scrutinized the feather for a long time. "There's something inside you trying to get out," she said. "You have to do something about it." "What can I do?" I said. "It's only 2 feathers." She picked up her journal and began writing. Now I was alarmed. Had I done something to deserve this? Had a bird flown into my mouth in a dream? I thought about my dreams, but couldn't remember anything particular. "Let's try one more kiss," I said. But this time a white dove flung itself from my mouth, flying wildly around the room until it hit the window and fell on the floor. "Is it dead?" I asked. She kneeled and cradled the dove in her arms. Then she carried it outside. I thought to bury it. But instead, she threw it in air. The dove caught itself before plummeting into the pavement and landed on a branch above us. "We'll figure this out," she said, squeezing my hand, but I could already feel a tickling in my throat as the dove began singing. So my closest friends live in New York, and my friend Roy and Charna, and I'm so close to them that their kid is my nephew. I think they made me be the uncle, so you get more gifts and all that stuff. And he's a jazz musician, he's really quite good. But anyway, they have this kid Gabe, who's a wonderful kid, but he gets his way on everything. So constantly he does the brinkmanship thing. He pushes them to the edge and he always ends up his way. So I decided to write a poem about that, So it's called "Buy Me a Horse," and it's for the Nathansons. Buy me a horse, our son chants, jumping up and down on the trampoline in the living room, his moosed colic grazing the ceiling. We say, "No horse." For 7 days and nights, he slams doors, crashes into walls, breaks bottles, toys, vases, clay pots, dishes, and picture frames. But we don't budge. Then he puts on his prison stripes and refuses to eat, shouting, "Attica, Attica." So we buy him a small horse. The horse sleeps with him in bed. He rides the horse to meals, to the bathroom, into the TV room. The horse lies down and watches TV with our son. They play video games together. The horse laughs when our son laughs, and we are glad our son is laughing, not crying or screaming. For hours each day, we clean up after the horse, scrubbing down the floors, disinfecting the house. Our son is so happy with the horse, but now he wants our room. So we give our son and his horse our room. We sleep on the bed in his room, our arms draped over the side, each of us falling onto the floor at some time during the night. The horse is growing, eating buckets of oats, loaves of bread, baskets of apples, and boxes of lettuce and carrots. "Let's keep him in the backyard," we say. "No," our son answers, "you stay in the yard." He mounts his horse and drives us toward the kitchen door. So we go out into the backyard and pitch a tent. It's not so bad, really. We have access to a refrigerator and bathroom in the basement, and we cook on the grill. Our son kicks out the glass in the brick window and throws out the garbage in green plastic bags. The horse raises a hoof. It's a wave, you know. I think I'm going to read a new one here. I kind of feel like it. I did this piece. It was, you know, it's funny. Some of these are serious. Start being serious, and then they turn comic, and then sometimes they start comic and end up serious. So I actually, because I come from St. Louis, there was all that stuff that's been going on there in Ferguson, and actually, to tell you the truth, Ferguson was actually a pretty good area, and isn't a high crime rate area. People come to St. Louis now, think of it as this high crime rate, terrible area, but it's really not. And I mean, what happened. I mean, that area was always known for what it is. Anyway, I started to write something about the relationship with the police, but it turned comic, and it didn't really turn into the serious commentary on the world I had expected it to. So you sort of have to go where things go, you know what I mean? So sometimes they surprise you a little bit. And I suppose it doesn't take place in St. Louis. It probably takes place in my neighborhood somewhere. In my neighborhood's West Lebanon, New Hampshire. Cuffed. On Pleasant Street, near the diner, a policeman caught up to me. "Please stop, sir," he said. I looked into his broad face, his chin fringed with blonde fuzz. "Have I done something, officer? Littered, jaywalked?" He shook his head. Then I thought about it for a second. "Are you selling tickets for the policeman's benefit? I'm happy to contribute a few dollars." "Nothing like that at all," he laughed. "I just want to hang out with you for a while, be your friend." "Sorry, officer," I said. "I'm very busy today. Maybe some other time." He frowned and pulled out his ticket pad and began writing. "What am I getting a ticket for?" I demanded to know. "Just taking a few notes," he said. A bluebird flew out of the diner door. Just taking a few notes, he said. A bluebird flew out of the diner door. I think it may have been an indigo bunting. A moment later, he sighted another unusual bird on the roof of the vacuum cleaner shop. He pointed at it. "That's an ivory-billed woodpecker. I'm sure of it. Very rare," he said. To me, the chubby bird looked like a pigeon, but I'm no bird expert. "Thanks for the ornithology lesson," I said, and started to walk away. But he placed his hand gently on my forearm. "Not so fast," he said, and in one quick motion, cuffed his wrist to mine. "Where to now?" he asked. Unsure of what I would do with a police officer cuffed to my wrist, I guided us to the police station. "I'd like to report a police officer handcuffed to my wrist," I said to a young woman at the front desk. She excused herself for a moment and returned with the chief. He smiled at the officer. "So you found yourself a new friend," he said. "Good work, Jim." Then to me, he said, "Sir, this is not a crime. It's community outreach." He nodded at the police officer attached to my wrist. "Book him." The officer led me through the door to the back of the station. "One of our best rooms," he said, uncuffing me and locking me into a cell. A small bird flew overhead. "A canary?" I asked. "No, a finch," he said. He pointed to a container of pellets. "Don't forget to feed them." So the book has got several sections. The first section is called Beginnings, and there are a lot of sort of biblical poems in the first section. Some are comic biblical poems, some are more serious. The second is titled Love and Family, and then the third section and that's the middle section. It's called Hole in the Middle. The fourth section is called Puppet Show, and the fifth section is Fate Written on the Forehead, which actually is something that refers to a golem, which is an artificial man. And in Jewish mythology, to bring them to life, you need some words, and then to take them away, you erase the words in the forehead. So that's what that refers to. But okay, so I'm going to read. Let's see, which one am I reading? A Hole in My Middle, page 39. There's a hole in my middle. When I walk, the wind tickles my ribs. Spotted butterflies pass through me on their way to Mexico. Birds deposit rings, mud, grass, as though building nests inside me. Children stop me to peek through the hole. I reach inside and pull out tufts of hair, twigs, paper, quarters. I remove broken webs, mounds of acorns, dead flowers, newspaper scraps, old cell phones. I fill in the hole with mud, seal it up, but soon chipmunks and squirrels scratch away the dirt, and the hole opens again. I lie down and place a pillow over it, but then my insides grow warm and damp, and I have to open a window. I can hear a funny music inside me, and things moving as though someone were rearranging furniture in a room. There's a strange quiet descending on the crowd.
darker out.
It is, it's getting
You
dark.
can't see.
It's getting darker behind me. It's like a vision.
Yeah.
It's like you're having a vision. It's
Yeah.
darkening behind me. I brought the darkness. Okay, this one's called Nothing. And I think, of the pieces, I've been reading some that it really probably more lean towards the mini story, although I always consider Bear Fight a prose poem. But some lean more fable-like, and this is probably leans more toward the lyrical, so I would, Nothing. Nothing enters the room in a gust of wind, a falling light, a flaming shadow. Nothing grabs you by the shoulder, causing you to wince. Nothing prophesies nothing good for your future. In your case, nothing says, nothing is a bargain. Hold on to yourself as if you were holding on to nothing. Pretend that nothing exists and you won't be disappointed. Pretend that nothing doesn't exist and nothing will surprise you. Try to imagine nothing. Does it encircle you? Is it the sky empty of darkness and light, and therefore empty of sky? When you embrace everything, nothing embraces you. Nothing rings a bell. Nothing deals the cards, plays all your hands. Nothing believes everything you say. Nothing touches you with all its tenderness and tears. Nothing tells you what you want to hear. Nothing takes it all back and gives it to you again. There's just, like I said, in one of these sections, I have a lot worked off biblical stories and tales and Greek myth. So there are a lot of pieces that sort of play with that a little bit. Kings. We executed one king because of his murderous ways, dead bodies piled up in the streets as if there had been another plague. We executed another king because he taxed us into oblivion, then took our homes and accounts, our passwords opening into empty cyberspace. We executed another king because he turned our daughters into concubines and our sons into slaves. And we executed another king because we couldn't raise enough livestock, couldn't harvest enough vegetables and grain to satisfy his greed and gluttony. Now, no one wanted to be king, so we decided we would all be kings. We took over the palace and the stores. We held parades in our honor. We issued decrees and created new laws to sustain us. Soon the killing, plundering, and pillaging resumed. Then we executed ourselves. So I don't think this needs any explanation, so I'll just read it. After the shooting stopped, we held our breath and waited. Smoke filled the holes in the air. Voices entered the doors, and boots clacked on the hard floors. We palpated our numb bodies to discover if we were wounded or dying. Blood pooled around us. You're safe, the voices said. It's over. Some of us rose slowly with our hands reaching out. Some of us crawled toward friends and lay on their still bodies. Some wept or sobbed violently. You're okay now, the voices reassured us, while lights flashed in the windows, sirens calling. Some remained crumpled on the floor, hidden between bodies, gripping bullet shells in their palms. Some still typed cries for help into their cell phones. Some recorded their own breathing and played it back. Grief. He built a house out of wood in which to lose his grief. He built a house out of wood in which to lose his grief. To fill the house, he stole crumbs from the lips of strangers as their tongues searched their mouths. He stole the sadness floating in the eyes of the bereaved. He stole the darkness inside their clasped hands. He stole the feathers of a crow, dried blood from wounds, bones from open graves. He stole petals from flowers, juice from broken stalks. He stole wings from widows as they stumbled over the grass. He stole half-laughs, whispers and voices lingering in the wind. He stole lies that were as good as truth. He stole truths that fell like silence. He stole silence from the spaces where bodies had fallen. He stole the perfume of death and kept it in bottles stacked in a room. He stole dark suits and dresses, shovelfuls of dirt tossed on caskets, dust from headstones. He stole trays of rotting cold cuts and the flies raising a ruckus. The house grew wings but couldn't fly. The windows dissolved. The doors fell off their hinges. The staircases rose into emptiness. He set the house on fire, and the fire burned for years, stealing his sleep and his breath, but not his grief. So all of you are familiar with the floods that have been around here over the years, and the poem I'm going to read has to do with the flood, with Irene, the flash flooding in Irene. And a good friend of mine, a close friend of both ours, my wife, Colleen, and my Brenda Guerin, a wonderful sculptor. And she called us up the night it started, and, you know, she had called the fire department, and they had said to her, go up, if the water rises above the roof, it starts to enter your house and your barn, go up onto the tracks above, you know. So she, you know, I would say that water rose 40 feet. I mean, because her studio, and then, I mean, there was a wall, and then a retaining wall, and then her house, and then above her house was the barn, and then above that was the track. So anyway, she was totally flooded. And then the next day, even though the streets were sort of blocked off, we managed to go behind the kind of police blockade and kind of walk over. And the mud was seriously so deep that it almost pulled my boots off my feet. I mean, it was really, you know, like after, you know, a hurricane or something, the sand is what washes up. But after a river fund, it's mud usually. And a number of us stayed over and worked with her at her house for many, many days after that, kind of ripping things out. And the thing that really struck me again was the mud. It was in everything. It was just like on everything constantly. So I wrote a poem about it. Mud. Out of the river, mud climbed broken embankments, crooked staircases, gleaming hulls, the corpses of cows, the skulls of cars. Out of the river, mud entered our homes, roasted its dinners in our ovens, filled our glasses with gritty wine. At night it made our beds, tucking sheets and spreading covers. Mud said its prayers and wept for us. It ticked in our clocks. It wore our shoes and socks, plastered our ankles. Mud took over banks, gas stations, the mayor's office. Mud baked our bread. It spoke 1,000 tongues, translated our deeper needs into simple sentences, filled out our forms, smudging the signature line. When mud wavered, even for a moment, it kneeled in soggy churches, renewed its faith. With its conscience clear, mud mixed its own cocktail and went out to spread the word, its logic impossible to rebut. Mud drove a convoy of trucks unloading cargoes of itself. Mud dammed the flood. It hired us to work, raking mounds of it into gardens and carrying it in pails. When we looked up, even the sun was mud. And, I used to read this poem all the time, and I haven't read it in years, and you brought up memorials, and I thought, I'd go back to a much earlier time in my writing and read a poem for my father and my uncle who died many, many, many years ago, both of whom were salesmen. And I was just thinking about, a friend of mine sent me, the same friend I read the Buy Me a Horse piece about, the same friend just sent me a text with a link to San Luis. Apparently the New York Times had written up San Luis just recently as being a good place to live inexpensively now with all the music and the art museum and a lot of other things going on there, So it was kind of interesting to get that. So I was thinking about San Luis, so I thought I'd read. But the last time you probably saw me read, I probably read this, Kathy. Did I, or I don't know?
I don't know.
Oh, good. Good. I got to hope that they forget if you're reading something again. Or I forget that I read it. Neither way is okay. Okay, two salesmen. Like I said, both my uncle and my father were salesmen. Work hard, my Uncle Harold says, and you'll get somewhere, boy. And my father nods his head of black, curly hair. With drinks cradled in their hands, they sit side by side on two throne-shaped swivel chairs, staring at the small black screen set in the tan console, carved wood doors pinned back against blonde wood. Harold sips the scotch slowly, but my father drinks it down, then rattles the ice in his glass. I sit on the carpet in front of them, playing solitaire, Vegas style, while they repeat the same stories. I just thought I'd get that across. I'd repeat. While they repeat the same stories, how Galvani made a fortune in Houston, how Klein's went under because of bad management, how Shaloff declared bankruptcy, but not before he put away a pretty penny for himself. I lost a 25,000 piece order, my father says, because Henry couldn't ship it on time. That's crazy. Harold's clipped, thick mustache tickles his long, hawkish nose whenever he smiles or laughs. He can make a quarter disappear from his hands and pull it out from behind my ear. He could shuffle a deck in one hand and turn over an ace of spades anytime he wants to. I tell him I've gone out twice in a row. Amazing, he says, but my father looks down at me with his tired eyes. Quit cheating. Play it right. Outside, the wind tears at the trees, and fading red and gold, the leaves tumble in a shower of leaves, and one more fall passes. The wasps curl in their white paper house shaped like a large, beautiful shell, and the cedar bushes bunch together like broccoli. In fall, my father died in a car accident, practically penniless, and my uncle went to sleep forever in a hotel room hundreds of miles from home, staring at a picture of the sea and 3 white gulls frozen on the shore. Work hard, Harold says, and my father nods his assent, cracking the ice between his teeth, while I cheated solitaire, pulling a card from the bottom of the deck when I need it to keep my run going. The swivel chairs squeak and groan as my father and uncle lean together and whisper their plans to make it big. Then they toast each other and touch the empty glasses to their lips. Thank you. Thanks very much. Thanks again for that beautiful introduction.
You're welcome.
Can I just ask a question?
Oh, okay. Yes,
Mike,
Andrew.
I've lost the ability to say wasp, by the way. I just wanted to mention that it didn't come out quite right. Go ahead.
You've got a whole section in there called Puppet Show.
Yeah.
And I wonder what the appeal was beyond this being a rich source of metaphor that caused you to give over such a big section of it to Puppet Show.
Well, that was, okay, so that was organized. I was having trouble. It started with this puppet show. I mean, I probably should read it, but the puppet show, these puppets who, people come to the show and then the puppets attack the people. They get a little annoyed with them and they start attacking the people. So I had a section of like Kings, the one I read, that were like sort of, I felt thematically kind of around the idea of these puppets doing these kind of bloody, violent tasks, you know what I mean? So it seemed like that fairy tale section had a kind of violent, political tone to it. So the puppet show, that's where so I think it came later. I explored that, then I kind of wrote some pieces around it, but I didn't necessarily say everything was going to be a puppet in there, you know what I mean? It was just like, in a way, the people they did become kind of the puppets in the section, as it was going around, but, you shuffle things around and move them, and move them around, and they start to take on different relationships for you. So I guess I looked at, that seemed like the very best title for this, the section, and it seemed to really characterize how the rest of the people in there kind of became that way, you know what I mean?
Yep.
Violent puppets, sort of, I mean, actually, it's a serious kind of fight, but it's also got some humor in it too, I think, the people are getting attacked, and they're saying these different things. Like one of them kind of says, "Those must be South American poets because puppets, because our American puppets wouldn't attack us like that." That's sort of the implication. So, but it is, So I guess that's how it is. Was I supposed to answer questions with a Q&A? Like sort of right? Okay. Well, there are other questions. I have several I could ask myself.
You kind of touched upon it earlier, but I'm always interested in process. But does your approach to these, you talked earlier about being kind of locked into this new, new style or new conceit. How did it come about, and when, did it just happen organically? At some point, did you start thinking more in that way, or
Yeah.
So could you talk about the transition a little bit?
Well, it's really a funny thing I say that it just happened, but actually, I when I was a kid, and early on, I was trying to write these kinds of pieces, and there were always a lot of surreal pieces that I did that just never made their way into the books. I took them out of the books because I was at first writing about family, like the two salesmen. My first thought was to write poems that were really, I think I grew up with Larry Levis was one of my teachers, and Phil Levine. I loved Phil Levine, so I really was first trying to write work. I grew up working in the garment district of St. Louis, so I wrote a lot of pieces about being in factories and warehouses. and then about my family, and then about just trying to capture the spirit of Sam. I don't mean Jimmy Stewart in that movie, but I mean trying to capture that kind of sense of the heat, you know, the wasps tracing me into the house as I tried to get in the apartment door before I got stung, and that kind of thing. So, and I'd have these other kind of pieces that I would just not know what to do with or how to work them in. And somewhere along the time of maybe Black Threads, I also wrote all these biblical pieces and persona poems. I just stopped, kind of trying to separate them, and they sort of became pieces altogether. Like the biblical, if all of a sudden I'd be writing about my home and a biblical thing would come up, and then something else would come up, and instead of removing it and doing it, I just go, okay, I'll just let that poem have that in there. And then I think that led eventually to me just kind of going back and seeing like what Tolstoy did with the Joseph story in the Bible, that I like the purity and the universality of some of those pieces, and trying to go back to what I was thinking about when I was like 10, you know what I mean, and sort of going, well, you know what, I'm also interested in this, what did Robert Frost made a comment, said something like, all poems begin in delight and end in wisdom, which echoes Horace or from an earlier time. And so I was like, well, the entertainment value, I was kind of a class clown, so I thought, well, let me get some of this into my work, which I'm not getting in a different way. I mean, I got some humorous stuff in pieces. I allowed that in. I think the first couple of books I didn't allow it in. But then this sort of opened up different sides of my voice, I think. So, and then what happened is, I think along the way, and not to overdo it, it's like I'm just, every time I sit down to think I'm going to write a poem about this thing in lines, and it's going to have this, it just comes out, the story starts coming out of it. Ernie Hubert said to me I should try to write a novel now, but I don't really think so. I think I'm invested in short pieces. You know what I mean? I like the idea of fable. I've been reading, like, the last X number of years, fables, mini tales, a lot of, like, Kafka, his short pieces, those have been big influences on me, people I've loved. So I think that's really where it's coming in. I don't know why I can't go back to the other, but it's just, it happened over a long period of time, and it just seems to come out these way. And I'm kind of like, my choice is not write anything or write these. So I'm going to keep writing these, and I'm still kind of enjoying doing them too, So if something comes up, I think T.S. Eliot made some comment, in order to, really in a way, to change your work, you have to change your life in some way. Like, or your life has to change. And I think a lot of things happened to me over a certain period of time that made me sort of think things. A lot of my friends, different friends died, my parents, a number of things that made me start thinking about things in a different way, So, so that kind of led to it too. I think there were a lot of things behind it, So I also liked reading it. It used to be I do one piece, and I like now starting with some of these pieces and moving into the more serious ones that go on. Other questions? No, I don't know if there's anything. Okay, so everybody go out and have a cigarette, if that's what you're going to do. That's what my students would do. I thought, no, don't. I'm just kidding. That's not a good idea. I don't smoke at all, so.
Huckleberry Finn, how's that? In my dream this morning, I started thinking about Mark Twain. I am proud that I read his most famous story about 10 years ago, before it was too late. I could see my hero's cousin Becky, his aunt Polly. I could see the Auntie Tom Sawyer flashbacks of boys happily whitewashing a board fence on the raft. I could see his runaway slave friend Jim. I could see my hero fingering Jim's wanted poster while drifting all night on the Mississippi and resolving at dawn that it's okay by him if he goes to hell for doing the right thing. But I could not see his name. Huckleberry? No. Huckleberry's a Hanna-Barbera character. Huckleberry Hound. But it starts with an H, right? And what's his last name? It starts with a letter close to H, right? I kept trying to go to the next scene to forward the dream for the answer, but I could not turn the page. If we can summarize someone in a single incident, this is the summary of me. At 2 o'clock in the morning, I had to tell myself to wake up, go to the living room, look up the name of the great American novel before I could go back to sleep. When I was younger, I could just jump into my dream. Don't be a silly ass. It'll come to you later when you don't expect it. Go back to sleep. But now that I'm older and trying to work out just exactly what occupied me for the last 60-odd years, what I've been willing to go to hell for because it's the right thing, this forgetfulness comes as an unwelcome sign of ultimate loss.
Hi everyone, my name's Karen Burnett and I'm going to be reading one poem. It's called Meridian Splendor. That I might begin with a fault line or a found fondness, linger latitudes and seek you out, our inevitable collide simply ignites through the imminent dove-gray window pane. Our reflection, two aimless points, intersected to infinity. In truth, there's contradiction. We have the same amount of salt in our bodies as ocean water. Those invisible orbits that destroy you, become you, across the table, face to face. Outside, magniloquent gulls apply crying prayers. Beneath buildings, I'll whisper your name to a spirit. You portion the tremor of your voice, slide along its surface, like clattering knives or smoke smudging air. Shattered glasses shimmer within this glacial pull. Does faith in another heal, reciprocate? Today a feeling failed me. Forever I'm a resident of your words, by the tucked away distances, still dwelling in your far-off thunder. Thank you. I'm going to read a poem that I just wrote the other day, or was it yesterday? I don't remember. What's the date today?
Not today.
2 days ago. Okay. So it hasn't been workshopped yet, so I apologize. Called The Green of Growing Things. I spent my early morning dreams washing emeralds out of cloth. Their hard nubs began to dissolve with a lot of scrubbing and running water under my thumbs rub. Even the neighbor, an old man of 98, who ran his lawnmower through the grass in our yard and straight into the kitchen, was getting things done. I had been on the screened porch where the boundary between in and out was defined. People had wanted water. I went to get it, but all the glasses were dirty. Like a waitress, I kept it all in my mind, what everyone wanted, had asked for, as rivulets of green melted from the stones like candy on the tongue. It took forever and never got done. Woke to read a poem about unborn babies and heard my name, scolding me for not being first. But then solace. Other imaginations are at work, their ink flowing and verdant.
So I thought I heard somebody say once, don't write poems about writing poetry.
That's all I read about.
So it just makes me want to do it even more. So this is called writing poetry. Sit on beauty, shoulders pinned under knees, crotch and face, give it a noogie, Charlie horse, hair pull, cheek slap, laugh at its agony, make it cry for mercy, or uncle, then let it up. And just when it thinks it's safe, monkey bite.
I'm just going to end with a Lucy Brock Broido died about a week ago, right? On Sunday, very young. So I thought I'd end with a poem of hers. It's called the American Security Against Foreign Enemies Act. Why do you, and I encourage you to, it's on at the New Yorker site, you can hear her read it if you want. Why do you feel most vulnerable? Where in Damascus were you born? To whom do you pray? What does it mean to have winged brows? Have you ever spoken through a mesh? Was it dark speech that you made? Is it hot inside your burqa? Who was Frank Sinatra? Why was our war called civil, and who won? Can you keep a bright gaze? How tall was Allah? What once was Palestine? What most displaces you? Have you visited Somalia? Have you ever crossed a border in a boat by night to another land? Sir, in all, how many died? Is your wife considered meek? Point to Mecca from right here. Why is our court supreme? What does the sound and the fury mean to you? Who was Huckleberry Finn? Has your husband ever traveled to Afghanistan? In Sharia, when a woman's hair is loose, is she a prostitute or slave? Do you understand what red state means? Do you speak American? Here, read that aloud. Do you have tattoos? What does paranoia mean? In what season do we vote for president? How much freedom does the First Amendment cost? Which is the tallest tree? You were once a doctor. How is it, as you say, you've come to selling vegetables? How tall was Jesus in bare feet? Do you consider him a refugee? Have you a disease that is contagious? What are the Hunger Games? Who sang Moon River best? Do you have friends or relatives who are barbarians? What is the blues? What is a second sleep? What most once made you weep? When was Lincoln? Who is Stephen King? Explain what obfuscation means. Have you been lashed? Who are our pilgrims? Why did they come? Have you ever eaten eel? Why do you bring just one small son? Where are the other ones? What are your other sons? All right, well, thank you, everyone. And we'll be doing more memorializing next month. So please spread the word. No features. We just feature the people that we love and emulate. And then we'll be back for, after we've grieved, we'll come back for some good fat.